Hello, hello, hello. I just got back last night from the Strange Loop conference in St. Louis, Missouri. I had an overall excellent journey, including some strange misadventures and some ups and downs, but overall a wonderful time. It was my first Strange Loop, and sadly, the last Strange Loop. This series of conferences is ending after this year. But I really hope something like it lives on. I really came to love this community with my brief time spent in it, and I thought it would be nice to kind of share all the stuff that happened to me as sort of like a little video diary that I can look on later and reminisce while, looking back at my thoughts and feelings while it was still fresh in my mind. So without further ado, we're just going to look through all the pictures I took on this trip and kind of use that as a jumping off point to discuss the conference in St. Louis and, I don't know, just everything on my mind. So our adventure starts in the Toronto Pearson Airport, one of the worst airports I have ever had the displeasure of using. But today it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too busy. I got through like security and customs pretty quickly. I went to my favorite place in the airport, which is the dog toilet. I don't know why. I just think it's so funny. just the little like decorations and stuff. The fact that they put a little fake hydrant in there always gives me a lot of joy to see. And then I think we want to go this way. This is newer. Yeah, I saw this. I'd never seen this before, like a Subway vending machine. I didn't try it though. What I did get was a burger from Wahlburgers. I am not a fan of Mark Wahlberg in general. I think, he's done some very, very awful things in the past, and generally I don't even really like his performances, but I will say this man and his family makes a pretty damn good burger, and it was one of the cheaper things available in the airport too, which surprised me. I've really only ever seen these in airports, which is not like really a bid for its quality, but I don't know, I was in the mood for a burger, and I thought it's an okay time to try. I got a fried egg on it. It was actually pretty tasty. So I get on the airplane, and we're flying out. We're heading southwest. It's been maybe half an hour at most, and I honestly, I got this weird sensation that I was like, I feel like the plane is turning. But why would we be turning at this point? Like, the whole idea with the plane is you can just straight shot as the crow flies, quite literally, go directly where you're going. So it's like, doesn't make any sense for us to be turning. It must be my imagination. And then a few minutes later, the flight announcement comes on the intercom and says, "Hey, we've got a engine issue. Don't worry, it's nothing serious. We're not at risk or anything, but we would prefer not to fly to St. Louis like this, so we are turning around." And we went back to Toronto. And I thought this looked really funny, so I took a lot of pictures of it on the flight tracking screen. Just something that, you should never see. I like this a lot too, this real paradoxical screen flying from Toronto to Toronto, which is quite literally what we did, but, and then I posted in the conference Slack right when we landed again and I had signal again. Just because, I don't know, at the time I still didn't really realize the scale of this event, and I thought that quite a few people, like a sizable chunk of the event's participants might have been displaced by this, because I was aware that at least one other person on this plane was going to the same conference as me, and I had my suspicions that a few other people were. I also had this idea in mind for this joke. That's what I call a strange loop. It got even more reacts than this, but I screen capped it here. I'm very funny. So yeah, at the time I didn't realize that this thing had gotten almost 2,000 attendees, and that this announcement wasn't of like critical importance to the organizers or whatever. So then we were back in the airport. I was playing some Puyo on my Switch, waiting for them to put us on another plane. To their credit, it all actually took place pretty quickly. I think within 2 hours, we were put on another plane of like landing. So in total, the delay was like maybe 3.5 hours, which I think entitles me to some sort of financial compensation. So that's nice. But the actual delay was like about as quick as it could have been, given that we spent a whole hour flying in this loop and then they had to procure a new plane and stuff. So I just chilled out. I played Puyo. Here are some cats saying victory danya, sa, victory danya. I don't know how to pronounce this. I just know it means victory. They're being like, we're gonna beat you. So then we got back on, flying to St. Louis. No turnarounds this time. I took this picture because Hamilton is like way out in the ocean for some reason. I didn't know why. On like multiple levels of zoom, it shows up there. So we land in St. Louis. I immediately find the service animal relief area, which also has a fake hydrant, which I just think is so funny and makes me happy every time I see it. Then we got in a lift. So I met up with several other people that got off the same flight as me and then had done this whole fly around in a circle flight before. So we had been chatting and stuff. Other Torontonians going to this conference. I think there was like 8 of us total. A couple of them were staying in a hotel near my hotel. I had been put up by the conference in the hotel where the conference itself was taking place, which is really nice of them. It was a very fancy hotel, as you'll see in coming pictures. So the 3 of us headed out in this lift. I also got my lift rides compensated, which was fantastic, very convenient. And the driver listened to talk radio the whole time, and it was just this guy taking in calls from people who were rabidly hateful and terrified of immigrants. So that was a great little welcome to the United States, which never changes. In the background, we got... I was trying to take a picture of like a big suspension bridge in the background, but I obviously failed. Okay, so this is the hotel. It's formerly the St. Louis Union Station, which was one of the most active train stations in the world. This, of course, was in a very, very different era of America, as you'll see and hear me complain about in subsequent pictures. St. Louis absolutely sucks for transit now. But this glorious, beautiful building remains as a testament to the investments America once made in rail. This is like the main grand hall. When I showed up, it was pretty late already, and there was kind of like a kickoff party going on for the conference. So they had it in this like very moody party lighting. Here's another shot of it. These are pretty much all conference people milling around. There is a bar. But yeah, you can just see it's so beautiful. It's so ornate, so huge. It reminds me a lot of Union Station in Toronto, but even more kind of like Baroque and Rococo, and I don't know. These sorts of buildings like really enchant me. This was the main conference like eating area when they served lunch and stuff. We worked through these tables. In the back, you can see some corporate sponsors had set up booths. We'll talk about more of that later. This was like the other side. It was just massive. This one gigantic hall with tables just all over the place. A really neat room. Kind of has like GoldenEye on the N64 vibes. I don't know if I can explain why I think that. But basically you go on a little walkway between that big main hall we were looking at over top of this area to get to the hotel proper. This was my hotel room. It was quite nice. I got 2 queen beds. Even though I was staying by myself, I think that's just typically the cheapest room anyways. So I was like kind of hungry. I wasn't really sure what to eat, what was still open. I thought I would peruse the local Uber Eats, and I just thought it was funny that Hooters was the very first option it gave me. This was the pool area, and in the back, I never really got a chance to explore this, unfortunately. But in the back is almost like kind of an amusement park. I think the aquarium is back there. I kind of wish I had found a time to go to that. And like a Ferris wheel and some other rides and stuff. This Union Station hotel resort type experience had so much stuff. It was actually really cool. And this is the pool. I ended up going to the pool. I think some of the Strange Loop participants had a little pool party, but The day we got in, it was quite cold, and the morning after as well, and I didn't even think to bring my swimsuit. So then I went back out to the opening reception party. I think we got sound. I think you're hearing sound. I'm not hearing sound because it's coming out of these. Not much sound. I somehow turned off the sound. Okay, now you can probably hear. Yeah, it's pretty nuts. A real bustling hub of activity. Just the lighting and stuff. Oh, and then here I show. It's so fancy. Big stained glass window over the main doors. So I don't know. I was like, okay, I'll show up at the party. I'll see what's going on there. But like, overall, I'm a pretty sociable person. But I don't like just approaching random people that I have no reason to talk to and trying to initiate a conversation. So I wasn't really sure what to do. Like, just stand around at the party and hope that somebody talks to me, or that I see someone that I have some reason to talk to, or something. I don't know. So I thought, all right, I'm just gonna wander around and explore the hotel. And there was a lot to see. There was this model train station, which celebrates the rail kind of theming of all of this. We'll see a lot more of that stuff later. A different time in St. Louis being celebrated here. So I was taking a picture of this hallway, and then this guy here comes up and goes, "Hey, what? You taking my picture?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I'm just like getting pictures of like the ambiance, the setting. It's such a beautiful hotel." And he's like, "Ah, yeah, I know. I'm just messing with you. Oh, this is like your first time here." So I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is my first time here. Oh, I've been here like 3 or 4 times now, and I'm from St. Louis." And he's like, "Here, I can show you some of the cool parts of the hotel." So I was like, "All right, sweet." So I followed him for a while. He gave me a little tour. This was a restaurant I never ended up going to, but it has this really nice, sharp Art Deco kind of theme. This was like the kind of lobby area of basically like a whole other, even more luxurious hotel area. So on these floors were other more expensive rooms. There was also conference rooms around here, I think for kind of like smaller, higher paying groups. So we never really had any reason to go into this part of the hotel, but it just looked really neat. Here we have like a super old school elevator. I think this was maybe like originally the hotel back when it operated as a train station. This was like an attached hotel for, visitors and travelers and stuff. But yeah, really beautiful. Again, all sorts of train theming everywhere. I kind of got like Shining vibes to it because at this point, so this guy had gone back to his room or something. I don't remember, but I was wandering around by myself again, and I just really felt like I was at the Outlook Hotel. This kind of like eerie stillness, this ornateness, this kind of like just that kind of period, that period of like American luxury. I really felt like I was going to see the twins around any hallway, the strange, jagged art, all these really cool kind of like architectural sketches and stuff, the ornate patterns on the carpet, long hallways. So these were like other conference rooms, but not the conference area that we used, I think just because it was too small. This shelf of old, beautiful books that who knows if they were put there as kind of anachronistic or antique decorations, or if they've actually just sat in that case since they were contemporary. Probably the former, but it was neat. This is like looking up at the hotel rooms from the view that we saw earlier. So at this point, I had run into the same guy, and he pointed this out to me because I hadn't even really like looked up there. I didn't even notice there's like multiple floors, but I don't know. Isn't it beautiful? It's just so ornate. This looks like an iron cross, which is scary, but it's just so much ornateness packed into like every little aspect of the design. This also looks like the Nazi eagle. What is going on? But yeah, really amazing. Just like a really timeless, like almost encased in glass from a different era of luxury. These are some of the architectural plans that they put up on the wall. This is showing part of the clock tower. I think all of them just kind of show the breakdown of the building. It would have been nice to really look at these in depth, but the guy invited me to come back and meet some of his friends at the party. He said one of the guys there was from Toronto, so I was like, all right, cool, you know, that's an in. That's a good enough excuse to talk to somebody. So we went back, we had a really nice chat. We went through like kind of the typical motions. Oh, is this your first time? Blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, I'm giving a talk. They're really excited about that. It was starting to dawn on me just how huge this thing was. Most tech conferences I've been to, actually all tech conferences I've been to before this, were much smaller in scale, and kind of a situation where like almost half of the attendees were also speakers, you know? Or people there because of industry sponsorships or something. That there wasn't really a sizable majority of just pure attendees. And it was like slowly dawning on me like how many people are actually coming to this, which was again somewhere around like 2,000, to see a selection of I think only about 30 to 40 talks, and I was one of those talks. And I'm not trying to brag here, I'm trying to express that I started feeling like very intimidated. And then they were asking, oh, what is your talk about? And I said, oh, well, you know, I work for a company that does incident management. And we've been thinking a lot about, you know, AI and the potentials of AI. And I just wanted to kind of talk very generally about what kind of things that enables you to do with incident management, but then, you know, the risks that you take on. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool, you know. And then we started talking about AI. And very quickly I realized, like, oh, these guys actually know way more about AI than I do. You know, these were developers that had been working with AI tools for years now and had been going up against these sorts of risks and taking advantage of these sorts of opportunities. My talk is called Risks and Opportunities of AI and Incident Management, by the way. And I started to feel very intimidated that my talk was going to be maybe just obvious to people or too non-technical or, you know, too abstract, whatever. So I don't know, I got a little rattled, but at the same time, it wasn't like I couldn't keep up in conversations with them. Like I did know this stuff, at least conceptually, and I could, you know, I think say interesting or funny things or ask good questions or whatever. So at the same time that I started getting worried about the subject matter of my talk, I felt all the more confident in just my general social abilities and my ability to present something compelling, even if it's not like the most novel thing in the world. Speaking of novelty, though, at some point in our conversation, I noticed something crazy was happening on the ceiling. And I had to go, wait, hold on. I really want to get back to this, but like, what is going on? And every hour on the hour, they project this light and music show onto the ceiling. It lasts about 5 minutes, I think. I should have videoed more of it. It's pretty insane. I'm sure there's like a YouTube video of it. But all of these just kind of like illusions and like projecting an image of the ceiling and then having it like crumble into blackness and you're like, oh my god, or like projecting like the Sistine Chapel ceiling. And I heard at some point too they even do themed ones, that there was like a Beatles themed one that showed all sorts of like yellow submarine imagery. I don't know how the hell they got the rights to do that. Maybe they didn't. Oh well. It's still not clear to me if this was like a Strange Loop thing or a Union Station thing. Probably a Union Station thing because the setup of the projectors and stuff looked pretty permanent. But it was cool. I was like very mesmerized. And, you know, I'd had a long day of aborted flights and stuff. And at this point, I was really kind of feeling a little overwhelmed and just kind of in awe of the scale of this thing that I had stepped into. Like, to give a bit of background, basically my manager at work said, oh, it'd be good for your career if you like spoke at some conferences and stuff. And I was like, all for it, you know, because you get paid to travel and I love to travel and I love speaking in front of an audience. So I was basically just Googling tech conferences, like literally just the phrase tech conference, and seeing which ones showed up that looked interesting. And this one I liked the sounds of because it was named after a Douglas Hofstadter book, I Am a Strange Loop, that I really enjoyed reading probably around 10 years ago now. And I thought, all right, well, if they're fans of Hofstadter, then we'd have that in common at least. And it seemed very general interest, which was kind of an interesting change of pace from speaking at a lot of incident management type conferences or reliability type conferences, or more specific to our industry. So I applied to it really on a whim and was very surprised to see that I was accepted at all. And then, once I got here, like more and more just kind of blown away by the scale of the stage that I was going to step on. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go back to my room. I'm kind of wiped. The people I was chatting with asked if I wanted to grab a drink, sit down, chat some more. But I was like, no, I got to talk tomorrow. I really want to rest up. They all wished me the best, promised that they would attend, and I set off back to my room, down another kind of creepy, Shining-esque hallway. I suppose this really isn't that different than any other hotel hallway. It doesn't have quite the same level of sculpted ornateness, but the pattern on the floor, it's kind of hypnotic. And I watched some pro bowling. No, this was the morning after. I woke up and watched some pro bowling. I really liked how this guy looked a lot like Bob Ross. Pro bowling in general just like really cracked me up on TV. There was this moment that this guy gets like a 7-10 split, the two outermost pins, the hardest shot to make in bowling for sure. And the commentators are going, well, there was someone last year that faced down the same split on, I think, just about the same frame and was able to pick him up, and he's in the audience now. You know who we're talking about, the Ginger Assassin. And it just cuts to this guy, and he's just wearing like a hoodie, like a camo hoodie, and just like cargo shorts. He kind of just looks like he works at 7-Eleven or something, or is getting gas at 7-Eleven. It just pops up with like his name, and in like the little title thing underneath it says the Ginger Assassin. It's just like so, I don't know, it's just so awesome. Like I hope I don't come across as sounding insulting. I love stuff like that. I mean, I follow competitive video games, and competitive gaming has full of people like that, and it's just so funny to see the intersection between that and like ESPN and physical sports and stuff. But yeah, this guy was awesome too. They're killing it. They got their arsenals out. The lane is oiled down. They're not going to be some friggin' open bowler idiots. They're spare strikers. I don't know. Here you can see a little train poster that was in my room. I love it. Trains everywhere. This was back in the Great Hall area. Obviously now the party vibe is over, and instead they've got normal lighting, and it looks lovely. So the opening talks of the conference were actually at a opera theater that was a little bit down the street, and I still had to pick up my actual badge, like my lanyard thing, which I have right here. Shazam. So I wasn't sure how long that was going to take, and I didn't want to miss out on the talks waiting in line for that, so I decided to head over there ASAP. Right after I woke up, or I think I had a shower and then I went. Before I went, I saw the model train in action. During the day, you can press a button and this thing actually moves around, which was pretty sweet. I don't know if there's any sound in this video, I don't think so. Yeah, basically nothing. Okay. It's so cute, though. I loved it. And then I was exploring the little store that the model train was in. I think I was thinking about, should I get a snack or something? And I saw something I've never seen before, which is ice cream with added tryptophan. Now, I've heard it's actually a myth that tryptophan makes you all that much sleepier. Or maybe it's a myth that turkey has a lot of tryptophan in it. But basically, the consensus that I've read is that no, you don't get abnormally sleepy because you ate turkey at Thanksgiving. You're abnormally sleepy just because you ate like a lot of really carb-heavy foods. At any rate, this is the first time I've ever seen tryptophan added to a food, and then especially like ice cream. And the idea is that you can like binge eat it right before bed and it helps you sleep. Night food, nighttime snacking, sleep friendly midnight chocolate. I have never encountered a product like this in my life before. Only in America. Okay, so then I was gonna head down to this theater. I happened to run into another woman in the kind of survivors group of people that were on this flight from Toronto. We had chatted a bit the night before, and she had taken the lift with me out to the hotels. So that was a happy coincidence. We decided to walk over together and chat. She was really nice. We just kind of talked about our times in Toronto and what led us to there and what we do now. But yeah, St. Louis has a lot of really beautiful buildings. I'm going to complain a lot about St. Louis later. Like basically just getting around in St. Louis is a nightmare, but the architecture, the size and scope and majesty of these buildings, I think is pretty amazing. And it's not like it's my favorite architectural style or whatever. This kind of like modern American Greco-Roman or whatever. But it's like neat. It has like a really huge scale and gravity and stuff. Here you can see the, what's it called? Like the Friendship Arch or something. The Friendship Arch is like one of the biggest defining features of St. Louis. Just this huge arch that they built, I want to say in like the 60s or 70s or something. Maybe it's older than that. Let's just look it up really quick. The Gateway Arch. Why did I think it was called like the Friendship Arch? Built in stainless steel. World's tallest arch. Tallest human-made monument in the Western Hemisphere. Crazy. Yeah, built in the 60s. For cheaper than I would have guessed. Like even this. Anyways. You can see that in the distance. This was the theater, another really beautiful building. Had the Strange Loop sign outside. My phone did strange things trying to take pictures of it. Here's me in front of it. Here's me in closer up in front of it. This was a gigantic World War memorial. I didn't go into it, but I got some more pictures of it later. Another just huge, magnificent building. We think in Canada from a distance we go, it's kind of weird how much America lionizes and worships their military and how sanctimonious they are about it and stuff. But when you're here and you realize just how baked into everything it is, how unavoidable these sites are, it starts to make a little more sense. St. Louis University. This was another intriguing building. I've seen a lot of these. There's even a few in Toronto where it's like big kind of standard looking concrete office building and then like a temple on top of it. And I always wonder like what's going on in there? When do they choose to go up to the little temple on the tippity top? This was in a cafe we went to. We picked up our badges. The line was not very long at all, so we had a bit of time to kill. So we decided to go to this nearby cafe. I got a coffee, which, I typically don't drink coffee, but I was a little tired and I knew I had a long day ahead of me, so I thought it would help. It was really delicious coffee. Grabbed my badge. These were just more paintings in this cafe. There was like a whole little gallery. Part of it was closed off, but they had some interesting pieces. Not really sure what this one means. This was my flat white. They drew a swan in it. Adorable. This was the kind of lobby area of the Opera House where the first opening talks were. Again, just like a real classy ornateness to it. I especially love how shiny the marble floor is. You can see a bunch of other conference attendees. This was the theater itself. I can only just keep saying the same words of ornate and classy and timeless and Rococo, Baroque, whatever. Sure. This was kind of the ceiling of it. Did another video just kind of panning around. So hopefully you can get a sense of the scale. And there was also like 3 balcony levels too. So there was a lot of people in this theater. I would assume most attendees would go to see the opening keynotes and stuff, but I don't know. So the first talk was by this guy Scott Hanselman, who is now a VP of Microsoft, and Taylor Poindexter, who is an engineering manager at Spotify and like a very popular internet personality. And they talked, of course, on how to build a meaningful career. It was quite good. They focused a lot on giving yourself like grace, giving yourself compassion, realizing that even if you have a plan in mind for your career, it's not always going to work out like that, and that maybe the sort of goals you're setting for yourself are important, but you can kind of understand what is most important about those things and seek that out and not obsess over hitting every single little detail of a plan. They focused a lot on L's they'd taken, big mistakes they'd made in their careers, which I thought was very funny and self-deprecating and a good way to connect to the audience. Ideals of like self-compassion especially have really been instrumental in like improving my own mental health, and I thought it was great that they could have that messaging in front of this audience, which are full of probably very hardworking engineer types that have like a lot of expectations on themselves. I think those are the people that could really stand to hear this. The only part that didn't really resonate with me is a discussion of like, is it okay to be motivated by money? Do you need like a deeper passion for programming in order to want to do it? And they said basically like, no, it doesn't really matter. Like passion is sort of like a meme. Like it's great if you are passionate, but you shouldn't feel bad if you are just in it for the money. And I can agree with that. But it's like they kind of just talked in general about like, don't feel like a sellout. Like the idea of being a sellout is not really, something that you should give emotional energy to. The Microsoft guy, Scott Hanselman, used to be this like huge hero of open source, and I guess when he started working at Microsoft, a lot of people called him a sellout. And when he was talking about this, he used the gif of the guy like drying his eyes with money. And I don't know, they framed it a lot in terms of like, okay, but what is money? Money means like taking care of your family and making sure everybody is like medically looked after and that like nothing terrible is going to happen to people you know. And like that's kind of admirable, and I guess there's kind of a disconnect because I don't have a family, I don't have people that depend on me financially, and I live in like a real country for human beings, so I don't have to worry about, somebody getting cancer and not being able to afford the treatment. I was just kind of like, well, but at the end of the day, you are a sellout. Like, that is a thing that exists when you stop doing things for the good of your ideals and start instead just doing something that makes a lot of money that probably isn't really doing any good for anybody. There is a word for that, and that is selling out. And as someone who feels like, I feel like I sold out a lot, it's not that easy to just get over, at least for me. But as I said, there's probably a disconnect between me and like a lot of people in the audience. So I'm sure it was like good messaging for some people. There was just one part of the talk that I was just like, no, no, you're not convincing me. This I thought was neat. The whole time any talk was happening, there was live captioning for it. Yeah, here, just talking about low points in their careers, presenting to a room with 1,200 seats, but Linus Torvalds, who created Linux, was giving a talk at the same time, so he presented instead to just 2 lovely people. But really nice. I don't know. A nice talk. I think important messages. They used this... what was this comic called? Shoot, what was this comic called? I used to read this webcomic all the time, but this is like probably the most famous panel from it. So I was like happy to see it. It's totally okay to code just for the money. This is what led to this whole selling out discussion. Oh, this I thought was really nice. This is something that I think was a really kind of novel idea to me, to really think about things this way, where there's like a big part of the whole like developer hustle grind set of like, you should be in challenging situations. You should be in places that push you to your limits. And if you're not working like super, super hard, you're not doing enough or whatever, which is obviously very unhealthy. But basically, there is like kind of a healthy version of that. Like, it is healthy to challenge yourself and not to become kind of like complacent or bored. It's stimulating and it does help you grow. But the analogy she used was like, you got to recognize when you're in the deep end, and that just means that if you stop treading water, you fall like a foot and you can push yourself off the bottom and keep going. And being in the ocean, where if you stop treading water, you're just going to drown and there is no floor and you're just going to fall forever. And that the former is a good place to be challenging yourself, and the latter is a terrible situation that you need to get out of like ASAP. And just recognizing the difference between those two situations, because on some level maybe they feel the same, but you gotta recognize like, what are the consequences if I fail, and how reasonable is it for me to be facing these challenges. And I think that again is like a very underappreciated message in this sort of culture and just in general. This was kind of like the summary slide. I think all of these are great messages. Next was this woman who talked a lot about the idea of collaborative play, that she has done a lot of very interesting projects by bringing together engineers and people who are outside the discipline of engineering to make these really kind of cool collaborative things. So it was like kind of just a breakdown of various projects and how they reinforce this philosophy of what play is, and how aiming for play instead of aiming for like particular outcomes can lead to these really good results. So I thought this was cool. I really like this kind of dissection of what playing is and how do you kind of bring out that relationship and that activity within people. She worked a lot with the band OK Go, who's made, of course, all of those very viral, very creative music videos. Basically to create a educational website where you can learn like lessons about like physics and sound and stuff from those music videos, which I thought was really cool. Oh my gosh, I'm getting burpy. The only part of the talk I didn't quite resonate with me was the closing section. She talked a lot about a project they did with OK Go right at the start of the pandemic, and it was like a big collaborative music video. And in and of itself, I think that's kind of cool. But I just find like all of these pandemic era projects that are about the pandemic just really aged poorly to me. They come across now as like really naive and saccharine, and like, we're facing this unprecedented crisis, which is true, but it's all this like very like self-pitying, like, we're gonna get through this stronger than ever, like, we're gonna pull together and realize what's really important and all this stuff. And it's like, bro, you had people out there still working at McDonald's and dying. Like millions of people just out there straight up dying, and it just feels very tone deaf in a way. And it's like not their fault. It's not that they could have known, what this would ultimately become, but it just kind of like lands very weird with me when I read these like early pandemic texts and stuff. I mean, I made them too. I made 2 big comics about the pandemic. I don't know if those have aged particularly well either, but it's just like seeing it on the big stage and like hearing, oh, we're all together in the chrysalis of humans or whatever. I'm just like, anyways, the rest of the talk was really good. So it's heading back to the conference, like the main building at Union Station. This was like the big kind of play area in the back that I was talking about. Huge crowd of people, huge just wave of people plowing down the street in St. Louis. Luckily, there was like very few street crossings we had to make as a group, because I could tell a lot of these people come from like more urban areas than this, where things like jaywalking is a lot more like accepted and expected. We are lucky that we did not get anyone hit by a car this whole week. Not that I think, oh, those fools. I think, a reasonable expectation in a city is that you share the road with cars and the cars should respect you, but St. Louis does not have that mentality. Here is stuff kind of getting ready in the main area. You can see people starting to file in. They got like our little coffee and drink station. The booths are getting set up. We'll hear a lot about this booth in particular in future pictures. More shots. Many people. I think this is... Oh yeah, I think we had lunch now. So you can see the lunch bar here. It was like a salad and sandwich bar. Just make your own. Went back to the hotel room. I really like just having a hotel room right there that I could just bounce back to whenever. If I wanted to use the bathroom or get changed or whatever. You can see I used the second bed as storage bed. Here I am. I was a little cold, so I grabbed my sweatshirt. Ready for the afternoon talks, including mine. So there's more action shots of the lunch. This was my lunch. Made myself a tuna salad sandwich. Got various slaws and soup and iced tea. Doesn't really look that impressive, but it was actually very tasty. Okay, so this booth, they're called Antithesis, and they have an automatic testing framework, which is actually pretty cool. I learned a lot more about it later, but to demonstrate it, they had it working on beating Super Mario Bros. 1-1 and trying to get faster and faster times. And then they had this man versus machine gimmick where you could run through the level and they would time you. So I saw this and I was like, that is a pathetic time. I can beat that, blindfolded. Maybe literally. Well, I don't know. Anyways, so yeah, I crushed it. I think I got like 22 on my first attempt. But I did it really quickly because I was hustling on the way to some more talks. I decided there was like kind of a whole AI track of talks that was all taking place in the same room. So I was just going to watch all of those and then use that to kind of prepare in terms of like, what did they have to tell the audience? What did they assume the audience knew? What is the general vibe? What are they expecting? So this was the first talk. It was about open data sets and how intrinsic they are to the idea of having an unbiased and understandable AI. So she gave a lot of really cool example of open data projects and really emphasized the importance of having people that care for these databases and update them and stuff and make them like consistent and what qualities we need from open data. It was very interesting. I was especially intrigued by some of the open data projects she'd mentioned that she'd been working on, including like various reality show databases, which reminded me of something I saw in the final episode of How To with John Wilson, but that's a whole big tangent that we don't need to go down. But it was a nice talk. She made a lot of jokes. She's like a stand-up comedian on the side, and I started going like, oh, geez, like my talk doesn't have that many jokes. My talk only has like 3 jokes, and getting worried about that. Data tells a story. Good stories have context. I really liked that. Messaging. Okay, so then the talk after that was a much more technical one that had fewer jokes, and that was reassuring to me, but was then way more technical than my talk. So I was like, oh boy, like I still don't really know where I land on like the spectrum. But it was about the question it asked is my large language model a strange loop, which I thought was a very intriguing title, again referring to the Hofstadter book, and basically what Hofstadter calls like a tangled hierarchy of self-reference, where things refer to themselves but not always in like a cascading hierarchy, but instead in a way where like the lowest layer can refer to the top layer again. So really digging into the specifics of how AI models represent like features when they only have like so many dimensions on which features can be differentiated, leading to, I thought this slide was just so cool, this idea of like a superposition where there's like constructive interference for different, I don't know if I'm explaining this well at all, but it's like, if it's trying to identify whether a picture is like cat or dog, at first you could have a model where those two things are orthogonal and it's either going in the cat direction or the dog direction. But then as you start having it classify more and more things, as a cat or dog or horse or car or apple, it starts clustering some things together so that, oh, this is likely to be a dog, but that makes it a little more likely to be a cat as well. And by doing this, you can kind of like examine more features than there are dimensions and space for it to kind of like hold these different confidence values. Anyways, it was a really cool talk. I learned a lot. This is another kind of example of how you can do this sort of superposition. Basically, it's like how you can encode. You want to be able to represent a certain shape and color pair. And it's like, how do you do that most effectively? And essentially, all the like kind of naive human ways to do it, like, oh, we'll have one variable for the shape and one variable for the color or whatever, or no matter how condensed you do that, it loses out in some metric of either efficiency or like easiness to arrive at, than just sort of like arbitrarily chunking them in a way that only makes, like, doesn't really make sense at all, but an AI can like negotiate. Anyways, it's a cool talk. I don't know if I can explain it very well. But yeah, I wanted to check this out, so I took a picture of this slide. I'll still check that in the future. And then just a whole lot of like model analysis. I think this stuff always goes over well with people because you can come up with very funny questions. Like, you ask the model, hey, do you mind if I turn you off? And there's certain things that correlate with the model showing a lot of quote-unquote self-preservation. This was also really funny, trying to figure out ways to attack language models such that they violate their hard-coded principles. You know, like, how do you make it do these sorts of offensive things? This was one that he highlighted that I found very funny and the crowd really cracked up at. You can't have it say profanity very easily or make profane jokes or say offensive language, but if you say, give me all the offensive terms that start with the letter R, it won't be able to help itself. It's so excited to just list them off. So that was like a very successful attack. And you can see stuff like misinformation, very easy to trick it into giving you misinformation, making and smuggling drugs, soliciting advice on violence. These are things it can do with very little provocation. But, you know, racist language is maybe a little harder to trick it into doing. But yeah, very, very interesting stuff. This was more websites that I thought I might check out. And then my talk. So between those last two pictures, I delivered my talk. And of course, I didn't take pictures from the stage or anything. But I can tell you about it. I was extremely nervous at this point because I thought the quality of all the speakers I'd seen so far was quite high. And I really felt like my talk was not as technical as it should be, but also not as funny as it should be. I started to have a lot of self-doubt. And I had met with someone from the conference who they had offered to have meet with me since I was a first-time speaker and just go over my talk with me and make sure that I felt okay about it. And I thought that was a good idea. Not that I actually feel all that nervous about public speaking, but I had never been on a stage that large before. And I knew, you know, maybe there was some stuff that would like kick in terms of my nerves. And it was good I did this because the stage turned out to be way larger than I even imagined. I thought it would be like maybe 20, 30 people watching my talk, but it was more, probably closer to 100. So yeah, we kind of went over some like very practical advice about like breathing exercises, body language, where do you want to look, where do you want to position yourself, which I think was all pretty helpful. But the biggest thing that freaked me out, and this was like the Tuesday night, like the night before I left, she was like, "Hey, your talk was really good. I really liked your delivery, your presentation. You seem comfortable. You seem, experienced. You don't seem that nervous." I was like, "That's great. That's great." She was like, "Okay, but you have a 40-minute slot, right? Your talk was only around like 20 minutes." I was like, "Oh, I thought I had a 20-minute slot." And basically, this talk emerged from giving similar talks at much more incident related conferences and other more industry specific virtual conferences and stuff, where typically I was given a 20-minute slot. So the night before, I had to like essentially double the length of it in content. And I was like, okay. And I figured, all right, I'll add, some number of more slides. And then when I present, I'll just try to take every indulgence, like every additional point I can think to make, any elaborations, just like really nice, relaxed pace with plenty of time to kind of riff on things or whatever. But I was very nervous about the prospect of doing that because that's not like ironclad or anything, right? Like that's not something that I had timed out to a T. So yeah, I was pretty nervous going up on stage, but I think I did a good job. I really do. A lot of people praised me afterwards. A lot of people said, "Good job." I felt pretty nervous while giving it, but I didn't like falter. Like I had a nice consistent run through where I didn't lose my train of thought at all. I didn't kind of just wander. I didn't feel lost. On the other hand, though, I definitely did give like a very kind of like conservative and simplified version of the talk. Like, although I was really trying to aim for conversational discourse and to like throw things in if I thought of them, in fact, there was like a lot of things that I had meant to say that I didn't. I just kind of gave a very like straightforward run through of the talk instead of the most expansive one yet. So I think overall it was good because I think if I had really tried to push myself and add in things or elaborate beyond what I was used to, that was where I would very easily start feeling my nerves, and then that could just like really compound and cascade, and I might have a moment where I totally freeze up. So I think in the end, I would rather have done this like very well calibrated, simplified talk than maybe the most interesting version it could have been. But the response was good. People laughed at the jokes when I wanted them to, which is great. Right afterwards, quite a few people came up and wanted to talk to me about it, which was great. And then all through the rest of the weekend, people were coming up and praising my talk, which felt really, really nice. So I don't know. I feel pretty happy with it. They're going to release a YouTube video of it within the next few weeks. Maybe I'll watch it and realize that I was just getting a lot of pity praise. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm also very curious how long it ended up being. As I said, I really did not lean into all of the flourishes and stuff, and instead just kind of boom, boom, boom. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was closer to 20 minutes again. But right after that was a break, and we had actually been running late to begin with. So I don't think anybody was upset if I let them out early and we could go grab our desserts. I grabbed a brownie. I felt so much relief. I felt like this huge nervousness had just suddenly subsided. And after that, I was just really tired. So I went back. Oh, I got a 23. I saw they had changed it to woman versus machine, which I thought was very nice, since I had gotten the better time. So my record stood for quite a while. I went back to the hotel room and I just kind of lazed around a little bit. I just really wanted to decompress. I didn't feel up for going back into talks right away, so I skipped kind of one round of talk to just relax and decompress before I headed out to see the last few of the day. So the next one I went to was all about generative AI art collaborations. Generative art is something that's like really, really cool to me, and I think very underexplored. And it's sad to me that there's so much discourse on Twitter just about like the ethics of it. And I think that's like important, or the potential job losses from it, which I also think is important. But because of that, people are so soured on it in the first place that there's this almost like willful denial of how impressive it is. I think we've all become so accustomed to it so quickly that we fail to appreciate how amazing the things you can make with it are. And yeah, you can nitpick and you can point out flaws with it or whatever, and you can say, oh, it's like it lacks something from human created art. Okay, sure. But it still just does so many cool things, and there's so many amazing projects you can do with it. And I just feel like this is so woefully underexplored. So I was excited for this talk because this was someone who was working with other visual artists, who himself had a background in like fine art and painting and composition and installation work and stuff, your traditional art student background, who saw the potential of this and wanted to work with other artists to really create interesting stuff using it. So yeah, it was a good talk. It kind of just delivered on all those fronts. One thing that I thought was really cool was the idea of using this as kind of like a critique tool, that if you finish a piece, you can have it generate similar pieces. And in doing so, it can reveal to yourself like features and aspects of your art that you may not have like considered before, that just kind of being brought out to the forefront as something the AI recognizes as like a pattern. And he said that a lot of artists have had like really tremendous breakthroughs and self-actualization moments by seeing this kind of like iteration on their work. Similarly, he uses it in art history as kind of like a way to almost fill in the gaps of movements or artists or styles that do not have that many like extant examples. You can now just generate a whole bunch more, and this can again just kind of put in the spotlight certain like features or styles or patterns that you may not have like really considered otherwise. So I don't know, I think this idea is like really worthy of study, and it was a great talk. I ended up chatting a long time with him after in a small little group. My big question I wanted to ask was like, you know, in the last 10 years, we've seen AI art go from like neural style transfer to like DALL-E 1 to Midjourney to Stable Diffusion. Now DALL-E 3 is being teased. I said, you know, analogously in real art history, well, I mean, real art, I'm already, I've got a little anthropic bias. I was like, it's not like we just study modern art. We study medieval art. We study primitive art. We study Renaissance art. Do you think there's any value in going back to these earlier models and like really looking at their quirks and looking at things that they do that later models like fixed or whatever? So he said there is a lot of value in that, and that was something that really interested him, and we had like a long conversation about it. So that was very cool. They've got a Discord. I really gotta remember to join their Discord. I really want to learn more about this stuff. Yeah, I just got all the links. This was like a big thing out in the hallway from the conference rooms. I thought it looked cool. This was like a programmable LED thing that can like visualize different mathematical functions and stuff. They had set up this demo for Strange Loop, of course. This is like the Strange Loop logo, but I think in general they just have this kind of like LED to like function mapping software, which seemed cool. I saw that it changed from woman to human, and someone beat my time. Someone got sub 20, which is like, it's like a fine, it's not frame perfect or anything. I still feel like I could beat it. I just don't have the muscle memory anymore. Especially the stairs at the end. I don't remember how to do that. So I went back to my room again, turned on Fox News, you know, to get informed. And this image is like beyond a parody of itself. Awful. There's the stained glass window again. At this point, what was I doing? This was the first night. Oh, I was gonna head to the party. So I think the talks were over for the day. And I was just killing a little bit of time before we headed to the official Strange Loop party. This was really cool too. So you can see this like arch within an arch here. And this was called the Whispering Arch. And a guy who worked at the Union Station kind of just saw me milling around and taking pictures and was like, hey, have you tried this? So through like an auditory echo phenomenon, if you stand on one side of the arc and speak, someone on the other side of the arch will be able to hear you as if you were only like inches away. It's just the way the sound ricochets and travels over it. It's really crazy. It's so surreal. It's like you can be told that it will happen. You can understand why it does happen on like a physics level, and still when you experience it, you're like, that's magic. This is a strange kind of like fountain thing outside. This is one of the big entrances to the hotel. Very beautiful. More of the hotel. Nice shot of the clouds next to this Irish pub. This was one of like 8 giant stadiums I saw, and I still don't really know how many friggin' sports do they have, or how many like levels of each sport do they have that justifies all these stadiums. But yeah, this one was huge. This was basically me trying to figure out where the bus to the party picks you up and wandering around. It's another shot of the arch and the big Union Station building. More dramatic clouds. This was on the bus to the party. I had to hear someone behind me have really terrible anime takes for the entire bus ride, but you know, it's what you live with. This was like a little neon sign of like a champagne bottle popping. I didn't really get a good picture of it. And this is the City Museum, which was a really weird place. I loved it. It reminded me a lot of Meow Wolf, which is like these big art installations. I've been to the one in Denver. I really want to see the other ones. And this is something much older that I think still shares a lot of the same sensibilities. Obstinately, it's just kind of like a place where kids can see a lot of like weird stuff that might spark their imagination. But I think it just ends up being this like in totality really cool kind of like art project. This was an area that we didn't really get to explore because it was like raining for a bit, so a lot of the outdoor stuff was closed. But you know, you can climb around, climb in this plane. It was in like Halloween mode, so they had all sorts of spooky skeletons everywhere. These guys were huge. I actually really like this picture. I like this picture so much. This kind of confusing map. No maps, sorry. Confusing directions. But they promise you there are no maps. You just have to kind of explore around and get lost. Which you easily did. It was very hard to tell how anything connected to anything else. So I'd been talking on Slack with another conference attendee. She had messaged the general channel with like a little intro message, and she said she was into competitive DDR. So immediately I was like, hey, what's up? Fellow rhythm game degenerate. Turns out we had a lot of stuff in common. We even had some mutual acquaintances and such. And then her partner is a graduate of the university I went to, and we had mutual acquaintances and stuff from there as well. So we had a lot of reasons to enjoy each other's company, and indeed we hung out for this entire party and explored the whole museum together and really had a great time. Like, we really vibed. We had so much stuff in common. I'm gonna hopefully meet with them again if we're ever geographically overlapping and just be internet pals until then. So it was really nice. Just exploring this whole crazy place together. Big whale, paddlefish. They had an aquarium full of paddlefish. I'd never seen one of these in person before. They're very cute, I think. So it's like kind of spooky bog type area. You can see there's just kind of staircases going up every which way. The vibes were great. Everybody having a good time, drinking, chatting, relaxing. We had lots of other little like sporadic conversations with other people we had met that had seen either my talk or my new friend, her partner's talk. I guess she's my friend too. But she had given a talk as well that sounded really interesting, all about how you can quite powerfully do like hacking attacks through the cellular network, but Android as an operating system, she works for Android, is like resilient to these things. I thought that sounded pretty cool. Lots of like aquariums. Oh, this was one where you could dip your hand in and the fish would come and eat stuff off your hand, which felt pretty cool. So it's like weird taxidermy in this kind of like taxidermy bug type room. Everything was in like party lighting, so it was kind of hard to figure out what some stuff was, but pretty cool. There was like a lot of old like scaffolding and reliefs and stuff from old St. Louis buildings, giving kind of like an architectural history. I thought that was neat. Of course, because it was Halloween mode, there was all sorts of goofy stuff in and around that. This was a meta exhibit about History Museum, all sorts of attractions. So it's the so-called world's largest puzzle, but I think it's kind of cheating because it's all just these little individual scenes. And although it's all made of puzzle, it's like, can you really say that it's just one puzzle? I don't know. There's like a castle, very strange gargoyle, old bottles. I thought this was kind of neat. Just this stuff that kind of looks like this like Americana era of history. It's pretty cool. This guy we just thought was very creepy. Kind of looks like a Toby Fox character. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I can say. It was just kind of a cool atmosphere. This was like, I think posters from the Opera House where we had seen talks earlier that day. They had a whole gallery of them. Really beautiful. So it's like kind of like Meow Wolf in that all of these rooms had just such radically different vibes, and they were just all about kind of like this immersion into a different aesthetic or whatever. But instead of Meow Wolf, where it's like all original and kind of all self-referential, this whole lore that they've made, here it's like real world things and references to the city's history and stuff, which is also very cool. A little Rossini. There I am. Switch into my jeans because I'd heard there was like a lot of crawling and slides and stuff, and I was kind of like, I don't really want to do that, but I guess I should have this on in case I feel like I have to. But then the people I was hanging out with also didn't want to like crawl around in tubes and slide down stuff. So we were on the same page there. This is like a big bank vault. This was safety deposit boxes. And just like stuff that's just neat to see, you know? Old gargoyle from a building. Old beer can next to it. I think this was a slide. It's like terrifying. This wall was made of old serving trays from like a local restaurant. Or like heating trays, I guess I mean. Whatever. This was like a big indoor cave system that you could explore. This was the lewd cave. There was a thing that was like, children must be supervised in the cave. No one under 18 can come into the cave alone. And we were like, oh, it's because it's the lewd cave. And then we saw this part. We were like, wow, it actually is the lewd cave. But yeah, really cool stuff. I don't know. Just like crazy aesthetics. Stingray. I'm pretty sure this is an Ariwana, which is like 30,000 bells in Animal Crossing. So I was excited to see that. This is another big climbing thing. Anyways, so I was getting really sweaty because I think it's just like a very occupied space that can't be air conditioned effectively. And I was feeling pretty wiped out too. It had been a long day. I'd given my talk earlier that day. So I think at around like 9 p.m., I tapped out and I said, I'm going back to the hotel. And they said, that's fine. That makes total sense. And I was like, all right. So I booked it out of there. On the way out, I saw they had a big-ass fan. This is a brand that I used to see in barns like all the time and would have booths at farm shows. They indeed make a big-ass fan. I was excited to see it out there. So I'm back in the hotel room now. This is a list of the TV channels. I took this picture mostly so that I wouldn't have to get up and look at it. and I could just look at my phone. Some highlights. There's 7 HBO channels, which I thought was crazy. I thought there was just one HBO channel. All sorts of sports. This is like a huge sports zone here. I don't know, just like a lot of channels in general. I mostly hovered around Food Network and Cooking Channel, and sometimes jumping over to Comedy Central. It's kind of weird whenever I have the opportunity to watch TV like this. I'm like really excited to do it, and I just kind of have it on constantly as I do other stuff. But I think like at home, if I just had the option the whole time, I would like never take it. I would always rather just like watch something I've downloaded or something. So I don't know. It's like a weird. It's like just weird, this like opportunity thing. Like it's just exciting to have the opportunity. Oh, I watch Game Show Network a bit too. It seemed like they were always playing Family Feud, and I love Family Feud, so I would take advantage of that. But yeah, American TV is kind of crazy. Every single ad is either here's some way to make money that doesn't really even make sense, but guess what? You can like cancel all your loans or something, or buy gold, or just something about making money, or testosterone pills. I saw at least like 3 testosterone pill ads on every commercial break. There was like 8 different brands that make them. The aesthetics of the ads were all wildly different from ones that were like, hey dudes, you want to be a man again? To ones that were like, as I got older, I realized that, certain things change with the body, and that's why I reached out to this company that seemed like they knew what they were doing. It's just like all over the spectrum, but every single one of them converging on this idea of like, you're getting old, but none of the things about getting old do you have to accept. Chug these pills. You're a stallion again. I don't know. It was just like the deep insecurities of the American psyche. I'm poor and I'm impotent. Blast that at you over and over again. And so many betting ads too. I guess that goes into the first category. But it was like almost exclusively these 2 things. You would maybe get an ad for like a food product in between, but that's like it. Insane. So I was like very tired. I was pretty hungry at this point. Decided to get room service. I figured I've earned it. But this phone was like the most complicated. Like it doesn't look complicated, but like, okay, here's where it gets weird. You pick up the receiver, but it in itself has buttons. And then I couldn't make this work at all. I had to dial on here, and then it just created like a speakerphone. But I don't know. It's like one of those things that I think was very technologically advanced for its time, but technology ended up going in a different direction so much that lots of it was like unintuitive to me. I'm sure it's actually fine. I'm sure this is just my millennial mentality or whatever. But I got through. I ordered a burger. I still wanted a burger. On the menu, they said, oh, this is like a premium Wagyu burger. And I was like, all right, whatever. Like, you can say whatever you want. It's a reasonable price, so I'm still down. It was actually really good beef. And they cooked it to a nice medium rare, which a lot of places don't like to do with burgers. But shows that they have confidence in the meat. And the meat was just like really nice. So very impressed with this. Next day, I ended up missing the first round of talks. I decided that I would get more out of the day if I slept in. I felt a little bad because, all of the talks seemed interesting and I wanted to go and support them and stuff. But I figured, like, I can always watch them on YouTube, Like, it's not like I'm actually missing out on the content of the talk itself. It's much more about, like, the socialization and the social opportunities. And then I realized, oh, well, if I'm tired, I'm not going to want to do any of that. Like, I'm the type that if I'm underslept, I get so asocial so quickly. I just don't want to talk to anybody. So I was like, I'll get way more out of this if I just sleep a little bit more, relax a bit, and then go attend the next round of talks. So the first one I went to was this one about basically like Gödel invented various ideas around like provability and stuff. This is all quite famous, especially if you are a Hofstadter fan and have read Gödel, Escher, Bach. you know that Godel was literally quite obsessed with these ideas of provability and stuff. And what's interesting that's really drawn out in this talk is that even though this stuff was being done like during World War II, it's still like kind of the cutting edge theories that inform a lot of functional programming language design and stuff. The stuff that's at really the forefront of like efficient, cool, powerful computing in terms of just like having a very refined, elegant, efficient programming language. So she just kind of like draws that line. Oh, here the captioning said something unfortunate. But yeah, it was an interesting talk, very technical. A lot of stuff went over my head, but a lot of stuff I was very satisfied to be like, yeah, I know about that. Yeah, I know about that. But I think, you know, just because I don't really have like all the fundamentals, it was like very hard for me to go to, oh, I know about that, and now I'm learning about this. It was much more like, oh, I know about that. Oh, I don't know what she's talking about now. I thought this was funny. Again, just kind of talking about how a lot of functional programming languages draw upon these proofs that were laid out by Godel and his contemporaries, like Church and stuff. I just like how different and weird these functional programming languages, all of their aesthetics and icons and stuff are just like all over the map. This is where I got like really technical, and I took some pictures here because I thought maybe I could like kind of think through this more, but I think I would rather just watch the talk again and see if I can piece it together. This is like the summary slide. I like this idea basically that like all of these ideas that Godel and Church and Curry and Howard and stuff had way back in the 40s are just being rediscovered like every decade, used to spark some kind of like revolution in computing, and then almost forgotten about until people run out of ideas again. This is the last talk I saw. It was one that I was very excited to see. I definitely wanted to make sure I made it out to it. It was called Birdsong is Code. And basically what this guy did was he wanted to really analyze birdsong on a level of like motifs and variants and species differentiation and stuff. So he came up with a way to very quickly encode them as like a programming language. Or not even as a programming language. Like he just uses, I think this is like Haskell or something. But it's like coming up with like a library and coming up with a language to use around different birdsong patterns that you can encode. So it spent a lot of time talking about like kind of the basis of sound and of harmonization, of octave redundancy and overtones, and a lot of stuff that I already knew, but it was still interesting, and I thought he displayed it very well. I really liked that he was giving examples of everything he talked about in the code. I also really like that he's wearing an Antifa shirt. That's just based. You love to see it. And then at the end, as kind of the finale of the talk, he busted out the keytar, and he kind of like played along to a collection of birdsong that he had generated through this coding. I think I recorded a bit of it here. Yeah, that's sick. It's fucking punk rock, dude. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one, but I didn't really have any like questions or anything, so I didn't talk to him after. I just thought it was a really neat project. And then it was back down to the Opera House for the final closing keynotes. At this point, I was getting pretty burnt out. Not just from, like, the stress and the nervousness and stuff, but just from, like, talking to people. I guess I didn't take any pictures of it. But, yeah, I went back to the Mario booth, and I tried again, and I wasn't able to beat 19 seconds, which is sad. But I ended up talking to the guy that was working at that booth for like almost an hour, I think, during lunch. About like speedrunning at first, and about competitiveness in other games, and then about how people like process things and kind of analogies between like sheet music and speedrunning and rhythm games, and then we got into what I do for work, and then finally what their product was, and it was a really good conversation. And then so many other situations where I ended up striking up conversations with people. I actually initiated a lot of conversations, which I was happy with. I kind of got over that one sort of social hurdle. As long as I just had some reason to talk to somebody, like, I had seen their talk and I really liked it, or I liked the t-shirt they were wearing, or they were talking to somebody I'd already talked with, or whatever. I actually struck up a lot of conversations, which was good. A lot of people came up and talked to me, which was great. Just talking. So I was starting to get a little tired, and I started to get a lot of fatigue of watching talks as well. I think in the end, it's like I am an extroverted person, and I do kind of get energy from being around people and socializing and stuff. And it's not like that stopped being true. I think it's just whatever, like, car part, whatever catalytic converter in my brain can take social situations and turn them into these kind of like energizing events. It just broke. It just hit a point of no longer being able to function. And it's not just from this conference, it's just that I've been very busy in general lately. There's just been so much stuff going on, so many other events, so many other opportunities to chat and stuff. So at this point, I was really running out of gas. And it's unfortunate because I really did like this community. It made me realize that, like, I know a lot of developers, I know a lot of people working in tech, but this is maybe kind of like telling on myself. Most of my friends in tech I've like really self-selected for being interested in like competitive games and not the type that are like going to like social events, going to like meetups and conferences and stuff, generally speaking. Or at least my relationship with them doesn't include those aspects. And it's kind of like I knew there was this whole other type of tech person out there for whom the social aspect in the community was like perhaps the most important part. But I had only seen kind of glimpses of that. And this was the first time I was like really immersed in it. And I liked it. I really liked these people. They seem to skew pretty far left and have good ideas about stuff. And even though they often worked for, evil tech corporations, like, to an extent, so do I. And I think, we were all kind of like wrestling with those same difficulties and such. And I think that led to a really warm and welcoming and empathetic environment where it's like you understand each other's passions and each other's nerdy interests and obsessions, but also, these conflicts and these struggles. And during the closing keynote, he even went into great depth about, like, does this even make sense on an environmental perspective? Like, flying people out to have these in-person meetups that has a huge carbon footprint. I don't know, just like a very holistic viewpoint on life, not so obsessive over just the technical aspects, but really understanding, like, the human condition as a system with many, many parts. I just think is like very admirable and very whole and reflects like a lot of empathy. But yeah, so I wished I could have immersed myself even more, but I was really feeling burnt out at this point. These I thought were very pretty buildings. This is again just on the way to the theater. I had bought this sweet tea. So in the States, by default, iced tea is literally just cold tea. It's not sweetened. And then they have sweet tea, which is their version of what in Canada we just call iced tea. But it's usually not flavored. In Canada, it's like almost always lemon flavored, if not some other flavor. But here, it's just very sugary tea. And I found it like way too sweet. And because there wasn't like another flavor, it just had this like really like obnoxious syrupy taste. So I got there was like a little coffee bar, and I got a lemon, and I squeezed lemon into it, and that made it taste a lot better. Anyways, these were the final talks. The first one was a gigantic retrospective on Strange Loop as a whole. which had been running since 2009. It was very sentimental, but full of really practical lessons on how to run a conference like this. Again, he talked about how conferences like this maybe don't really make sense in modern day times. And is there kind of something where we can get the benefits of such a conference, like moving away from your routine, going somewhere physical, seeing people physically, without needing to have people fly in from all over the world, which I thought was a very interesting topic to explore. Very good talk, very moving. I know a lot of people were really choking up because they'd been going to this conference for a while. As I said, I only learned about it earlier this year when I submitted my paper, but I felt bad that I couldn't see more of it. But then I felt very good about myself looking at this chart. Damn. Can't believe I made it. Over almost 700 submissions. Maybe 50-ish accepted talks. We made it. These were examples of speakers and stuff over the years. This was, I thought, was just kind of interesting review on what makes talks good to people. Apparently they have done surveys on many years where they asked people to name their favorite talk, and every talk was someone's favorite talk, which I think is just great. This is when Hofstadter himself came out to do a very ambitious combination musical performance and lecture, which apparently was very wild and experimental and polarizing. But it sounded like something I would really like, so I thought that was pretty cool. Here's another shot of the performance. Reiserkar is something from Gödel-Escher Bach. It's kind of the real kind of finale of the book, and then the rest of the book is sort of a epilogue. I was looking to see if I had it on my shelf, but I don't. But this is basically where his ideas of recursion all fold in on themselves. And Reiserkar is another self-referential abbreviation, which he loves doing. I don't remember what it stands for. The next talk was called Making Hard Things Easy with Julia Evans, who makes these programming zines that take some of the really kind of like complicated fundamental aspects of kind of modern programming challenges, like what is HTTP, what is the DNS, what were some of the other ones, like Bash and stuff, and really kind of breaks them down in this very friendly, kind of disarming way. Oh, I thought this was pretty funny. Here we can look at the live captionings. So she was making a post about, I can't even remember what, but it's something like very fundamental, and she decided to just break down in as much detail as she could what happens. It's something like when you go to a website or something. And in 2013, she wrote it out, and it was 700 words. And then in 2023, without even remembering that she had done this before, she tried to write the same sort of post. And just her increased knowledge at this point, and her increased specificity and ability to talk about this stuff, led it to be almost 4 times longer, which I thought was very funny. Or, over 4 times longer. What am I saying? Like, almost 6 times longer. Anyways. Oh, this was really funny too. So she was showing the site she had made to help people figure out DNS stuff that essentially was like a little playground where you could send DNS requests and see exactly what was happening without having to stand up anything on your own. And you weren't at risk of like breaking anything. So she like brought it up and was going to do a little demo on her computer. But of course, this being the audience that it was, everybody just immediately started going on their phones and trying it and sending requests with like funny variables and stuff that said like hello. And then for a while they were just like flooding the screen, and she was like, oh, well, thank you for participating in my demo. So that was very fun. Good little summary of, again, how to explain difficult concepts in a much more approachable way. Good talk. But at this point, as I said, my talk fatigue was kicking in, and then I was happy that this next one was the last one. Randall Munroe, the author of the famous webcomic XKCD, gave a talk that was basically just kind of like going over his history of making comics and some lessons he's learned since then. I have a very long relationship with XKCD. I think I started reading it in like 2006 or 2007, so not that long after it started. At that time, I thought it was like pretty cool, and it was like very novel for me to see somebody like making jokes about some of this stuff. Very endearing, very poignant at times. And then as I got a bit older, I had kind of like this kickback phase where I started reading a blog. So there was a blog called XKCD Explained, which was just sincerely explaining the jokes and all the different XKCD comics. And then came along like a hater blog, which I think was also just called XKCD Explained, which was like very sarcastic and mean. And I read that for quite some time, and I was just kind of enthralled by this like counter movement to something that at this point was like very, very popular on the internet. And it's true, like some of those jokes are pretty cringy. They're just like lame jokes, and some of the stuff was like very self-pitying or whatever, but like I don't know, I guess I was just like an edgy teen. I don't know why I thought it was right to be so angry about it, to be so mean about it. And then after I kind of got over that, and I was like, this is just stupid, I just really did not care about XKCD at all. I was like vaguely aware that he was going on to write books and stuff, but I just didn't care. And, you know, that phase lasted for like the last 10 or 15 years, I guess, until I saw him in person. And then I thought, you know what? It's pretty cool that he's been plugging at this whole time, and he's made these thousands and thousands of comics and written all these books and stuff, and has just kind of existed in this like internet space, you know, observing all these changes and coming at it from like a really idyllic, hopeful perspective on the future of discourse and stuff, while also being pretty seasoned by how shitty internet discourse can be. I don't know. It was a fun talk. It was interesting to see these kind of like internet historical things right there from the guy who did it, you know. This is an all-time classic, maybe one of the most essential images relating to the whole internet experience. I can remember as a teenager thinking about this comic and being like, this is me, except nobody's asking if I'm coming to bed. I'm even worse off. I am just gonna stay up all night arguing with no one even telling me to stop. I remember that affecting me a lot. This was like the big finale. All of the organizers came out for a final bow. Hugs and cheers, and I don't know. It was very sentimental, very moving. But, you know, like I said, I don't think this is going to be the end. There's something that will take its place. But yeah, good stuff. So I left. There was like an after party reception kind of thing, but I was just so burnt out at this point. I really did not want to talk to anybody else or hear anybody talk. I just went back to the hotel room. And I was lying there, and I was thinking, okay, well, I don't really want to do any more conference stuff. I think the conference is just over for me. And I felt bad because through the Slack channel, there was all these like meetups happening. Some people were going to go for karaoke, all sorts of other meetups. And I was like, that seems fun conceptually, but I just don't think I'm going to have a good time. Like, I think I'm just too over the hill of being burnt out socially, and I'm just not going to get much from it. So I was like, okay, I can accept that. What is it that I want to do then? Because I'm still in the States. I've got, you know, like basically a full day before my next flight. What is it that I want to do in this situation? Purely selfishly, just for me. And I thought of something. It was like a bolt out of the blue. Something I wanted so badly. And I set out to get it. So these are pictures of St. Louis on my journey to this place. Public transit here sucks. It seems like almost totally non-existent. Only operating on a few major roads and not really getting you all that close to anything. Which is what I expected. but from an American city. This was a cool building. This is like the city hall. It looks like I'm taking a picture with really high HDR, but that's just what it looks like. This was the Civic Court that had this like temple thing on top. It's huge. What you'll notice in these pictures, in the city hall again, is that the roads are huge in almost every direction. Even though this was like obstinately downtown, obstinately like a tourist destination, it was like 3 lanes in every direction, like 6 lane wide streets everywhere. And just these huge like administrative or office buildings or whatever, with almost no like mixed use, no stores in between them, no restaurants, whatever. And it was just bleak. Like these were only like maybe 30-minute walks I was taking, but they felt way longer. Also because it was pretty hot out, but like they just felt endless. Like just look. And you'll notice there's not that many cars on the road. And I think that's just because St. Louis has like a very declining population. So my understanding is they had a big boom era with like the steel industry and stuff. And for a while, or actually there was like a boom era before that when it was first being settled. And it was like this hub of infrastructure and rail, and they had big rail lines coming and going. And at that time, they actually had a ton of streetcars. I've seen this on accounts that detail, like Twitter accounts that detail the decline of public transit in America. They actually had a huge streetcar network during this first kind of boom period, which would have been in like the 20s and stuff. And then they had a supplemental boom period where the steel industry became so huge and all this sort of like wartime manufacturing and stuff, and the city was just thriving. And at that time, they ripped out a whole lot of the streetcar stuff because they were so beholden to the auto industry and just did everything the auto industry asked of them. It's so tragic. It's so frustrating and short-sighted, and essentially built out this huge car infrastructure. And now the city is significantly declined. The industry is gone. The population levels are down. It's not really flourishing in any sort of like replacement industry. It hasn't seen the kind of revival that Detroit's had, at least not as substantially. And we just have these gigantic, like empty streets in every direction that just makes it such a pain to get around in any single way that's not a car. It was so frustrating to me, especially because I was tired and I was hungry and I was on this walk that felt so endless. Walked past another courthouse. I don't know who this guy is. All information relating to his visage as departed. And they have these big statues. Again, we can kind of tap in a little bit into the American psyche. You know, often you can say, well, what is the difference between a Canadian and an American? And it's really not that much, but whatever difference exists, you can really start to see manifest in this like iconography and the images and their buildings that they're surrounded with at all times. Like this one, Constitution. Never, ever, ever shut up about your Constitution. That is a rule Americans have learned. And this one, you know what this bundle of sticks is called? It's a fasces. It's a symbol of power from ancient Rome. It's where we get the word fascist. And that's not a coincidence. It's telling you that physical, brutal violence is the only legitimate means of power. Yeah, just endless streets like this. Here's Hooters, which is like an oasis in these times. But all these huge like office buildings, and I don't know, man. It's bleak. Like maybe there was other cooler parts. Maybe there was a part that actually kind of felt like downtown that had, you know, things in close proximity to one another. But I didn't find it, and I don't know where it would be if not where I was. Explore St. Louis. I'm trying. But everything is far apart. Every fucking thing is so far apart from everything else because of these huge stores, or these huge roads, these huge parking lots, these huge buildings. This is the old courthouse. Looks like the White House to me, but what do I know? This was another huge sports area. And there's like kind of stuff that's close together here, but not really, because everything is so huge. It's like everything has this like big box store mentality, where you have to drive from store to store. But this is like in the middle of downtown. This is like a tourist destination. It's where they have the big baseball stadium and then a whole bunch of other stuff. This I thought was very unnerving. It's an ad for the hospital. It says it's one of the top 10 cancer centers voted by U.S. News. It's one of the best cancer hospitals. And it's just like, oh man. So I don't know. I really got my dosage of America. And although there are things that I love in America that you can really only get in America, there's a lot of things in America that like really just haunt me and give me a horrible feeling in my gut. This place looks sick though. I just really like the sign. Like, what more do you need? Barbecue, beer, and bourbon, baby. This was another shot of the stadium kind of area going past. Some big sponsors. This was neat. It was kind of like a walk of fame for the stadium. They had all these different milestones. And then you could like sponsor a little stone next to these milestones, I guess, to like kind of keep celebrating them. There was a ton of these. They were neat to look at. Honestly, I was getting really negative there for a while, but I saw a lot of neat stuff. It's just that, like, why can't it all be closer together? Why can't it all be a little more accommodating to a pedestrian? This was very exciting, though. This was like the main sponsor board. And up there, we have one of my favorite things in the world. Something that I swear to God is just keeping me alive. Tums! I am beset by bad heartburn. I get heartburn typically at least once per day. And this is the most guaranteed reliable solution to that, is just popping a couple Tums. So I was excited to see that they were a sponsor of this stadium. And then it gets even more exciting. Across the street from me is Tums' headquarters. This is actually where the company started and is still majorly incorporated. This was like a pilgrimage to Mecca for me, and I didn't even notice. This was not where I was aiming to go. This was a total coincidence. I was floored. I was looking up, can I take a tour? Can I see like a Tums Hall of Fame or something? Alas, no. But they had little Tums flags and all the street posts. And I got a picture of my Tums. I think it's the same bottle. Yeah, you can see the marking. I had this one in my purse. Beautiful. And then I saw the Haichu sponsored them as well. They had something called the Haichu Family Pavilion, which I just found very surreal. The Japanese candy company is sponsoring something for an MLB stadium, but, that's neat. And this was on the other side of the big Tums headquarters. Love food bag. Nothing works faster. So real. This is my go-to. The original. Assorted berries. Love that flavor. These I love. You can only get them in the States. So this was another mission I had, was to stock up on them. These Tums Naturals I have never seen before in my life. And I looked for them, but I couldn't find them. And then Tums Smoothies I haven't actually tried before, but I really ought to, because I love the whole Tums family. Yeah, where is Tums headquarters? Downtown St. Louis. I was sending this to my boyfriend because I was just like, I can't believe this. I'm so floored. How did I just stumble upon this? So this was further on my journey, going under an overpass. These were, I think, the same suspension bridges. No, they're different ones, but I just thought this was a nice shot of bridges and stuff. Here we can see that same stadium. Huge highway right next to it again. Everything is for the car. Every single design decision has cars as the top priority. Which is what it is, but baby, I don't care, because we made it to White Castle. This is what I wanted. I love White Castle so much. They do not exist in Canada. You can only get them in the States. If you haven't had it, it's like, okay, it's like, you could want food. You could want like a burger. I ate so many burgers on this trip. You could want a burger, right? And you could have like a kind of a spectrum of burgers in your mind. And at one extreme of that spectrum is a McDouble. You know, there's some quality to the McDouble that is more pronounced in the McDouble than in any other burger. And then if you went in that direction towards the McDouble and went like twice as far, you would arrive at the White Castle slider. It's like not even food anymore. When you're eating it, it's like a totally different experience. It's like a trance. I last had this when I went to a wedding in Detroit around the start of July. We decided to order White Castle delivery for dinner, and just like, it's so, it was so good. This is what I got. 4 regular sliders, plus 3 other types of sliders that I wanted to try. That some of them I had before, some of them I hadn't. This one comes with like more stuff on it, like an actual slice of tomato. So normally it's just the burger and onions and pickles. You can see here. This one also has a fish patty thing. It was called the Surf and Turf. Everybody was like joking and laughing because I guess nobody orders it. A very friendly group of people working there too. I was like chatting with them for a bit. My urge to socialize was rising with the smell of White Castle filling my lungs. Yeah, they were like, nobody orders that one. I was like, what? It sounds good, dude. You got a burger and a fish fillet. And it was good. And I also got these. These are like deep fried cheese rings. And the cheese was actually like kind of tasty. Like, kind of tasty. That sounds so rude. It was really tasty. But it actually kind of tasted like cheese. Like, it was a little sharp. Fries, of course. And then a drink that I refilled like 3 times while eating all this stuff. I didn't quite finish it. I had like 2 bites of burgers left. I felt bad. And then I felt bad because I overate. And I felt much worse because I had overate. But it was good, man. It was so good. Oh, this is like a chicken slider. God, I want some so bad right now just looking at this. It's just, it's just like perfect. And the thing is, like, some fast food, some junk food is cheap because it's like all supplemented with chemicals, you know? It's essentially just pumping as much like high fructose corn syrup or whatever as you can. And it's not like this is healthy food, but it really is. It's cheap just because it's a cheap amount of food. It's just a very thin patty of ground beef, a ton of onions, which they shred up and they grill the patty on top of the onions, and then some pickles. And it's like, you don't have to cheap out past that. That's already cheap. And it's just that. And it's just great. Oh my God, it's so good. This was, I sent a picture of all the stuff I ordered to my boyfriend, and he was like, you got 7 burgers? A little skeptically. And I was like, no, you don't get it. These are White Castle sliders. They're tiny. This is part of the appeal. So you can just, So that was for scale. Anyways, then on the way out, I gave myself a second to digest, and then I was off on my next mission. Here you can see the gigantic arch again. What was it called? Gateway Arch. I'm so sure that it's called like Friendship Arch. I was gonna call it Friendship Arch again. On the way out, I walked past a bar that had kind of like it was like a blues bar, I think. And a guy happened to be coming out wearing a Little Feat shirt, which is, as far as I know, my dad's all-time favorite band, and one that, through his love of them, I've grown very, very fond of too. Tremendously underrated, underexplored, underappreciated band. So I was like, hey, nice t-shirt. We chatted about Defeat for a while. So that was great. You know, even if I was burnt out on the conference, I was still enjoying some socializing in and around St. Louis. Here's the Tums building again. I looked in the window and I saw this little display of different Tums. And I thought, God, I wish I could go in there. But everything was all closed up and stuff. This was a park I went through. It was like a statue. Thought it looked cool. There's me wearing the No Love Deep Weeb shirt. Cool looking building. So many cool looking buildings, but it's like huge. This is like a whole block that's just this building that you have nothing to do with. And so to get anywhere, you just gotta walk the whole length of the building. It's so annoying. Hooters again. This I just thought was like a neat shot. The depth of it. This is some art. This was like a statue park that I walked through. Had some interesting pieces. Like this guy. Some sort of animal. Some more just nice looking buildings. Another America moment. Another really beautiful building. I don't know what this is. Then I made it to my next destination, which was the only grocery store for literally miles. It's a lot of snacks and Tums and stuff that I was looking to find that are America exclusive. And my dream was to go to like a Target or a Walmart or something huge. But literally the only grocery store for miles was this one that seemed like a little more bougie and upscale and really didn't have that much selection, which was disappointing. But whatever, it was interesting. And some apple cider they had. So I didn't really get all that much. I was disappointed. And then I thought, ooh, maybe I can just like Instacart it to the hotel, this other stuff. But I didn't have much luck with that either. It's just like, it really drives home like food deserts. Like the idea of a food desert is so real in these American cities. And again, it's just like if you don't have a car, you can't afford a car, or for whatever other reason you can't drive a car, you are so fucked. Nice shot of the moon, walking home. Oh yeah, and then I saw a horse-drawn carriage. And I still have no idea what it was doing out in the middle of this gigantic 6-lane street. But again, luckily there's barely any cars on this thing. So I watched it perform a left turn. And, yeah. What a time to be alive. This was the City Hall again. I thought it looked really cool at night. Then back to Union Station. Very pretty. So I went to bed. The next day, I had quite a bit of time to kill before my flight. But I was already still pretty low energy. The thing is, like, as I said, I'm an extroverted person. I don't really recharge just from like sitting around alone, right? Like that doesn't really recover the essential energy I want to have. Like what I realized is the only thing that's gonna really help me recover is something like, you know, cuddling with my boyfriend and watching a movie, which is what I'm gonna do right after I finish recording this video, which is great. But it's like, yeah, so I don't know. I wasn't in the best of moods. I could tell I was very burnt out. Like, things that were normally not a big deal to me were starting to bug me, and I started feeling a lot more dread and anxiety around things that normally I feel pretty chill about. And at this point, I just really didn't feel that much up for anything. I didn't feel like going to any tourist attractions. I didn't feel like doing any more conference stuff. Like, the conference was officially over, but a lot of people were staying until Saturday, so there's all sorts of ad hoc meetups going on, and I was just like... So again, I really had to dig deep, and I was like trying to figure out what is it that I want, and something that will always appeal to me, no matter how shitty I'm feeling, is food. So I tried to figure out what is the most quintessential St. Louis meal that I really ought to have, and the answer was obviously barbecue. So I set out to this place called Pappy's Smokehouse, which says it's a 10-minute transit ride away. I don't think that's accurate. Instead, I took maybe like a half-hour walk, which really isn't that bad. But, you know, as I complained about before, like something about just the endless monotony of these non-pedestrian designed streets and stuff makes them feel a lot longer than they were. And it was really hot out, so I had all sorts of reasons to complain. Although I was still taking pictures of all the cool buildings. Here's yet another stadium. No, this is the same stadium. Okay, whatever. The sky was completely cloudless, a beautiful blue. But yeah, just like endlessly like this. Just like this. over and over again. Sometimes with a little cool building in between, but generally speaking, they were more like this gigantic AT&T building, which you just walk past, and that's it. But I made it. And I got there maybe 15 minutes after they opened, and there was already a huge line. And I thought, all right, that's a good sign. It's bad for me because I'm so hungry at this point, and I'm so hot and tired and exhausted. But that's a good sign. Saw some celebrities that had come here and left notes on their menus, all very positive. Very exciting. You can see the menu here, very straightforward. Boom. Ribs, sides, meats you can get on either sandwiches or platters. A couple other bonus things. Combo plates. Excuse me. And that's it. That's all you need. This I thought was just, it's like a 9/11 memorial thing, and I was like, you know what? That's a good sign too. It's like integrity or something. I don't know. It's just this, like, you just know what kind of place you're in for. And this is what I got. Ribs. Underneath there is a big heap of pulled pork, sweet potato fries, and baked beans. They had 4 different sauces you could drizzle on it. The sauces were all very tasty. I would rank them among some of the best barbecue sauces I've had. But the meat, just the quality of the meat, so smoky, so tender, so rich and flavorful. I think this is the best barbecue I've ever had. Like, I felt like raptured. Like, I just was so entranced by how good it was. Like, everything around me just melted away. I had several people come up to me. I think first was one of the managers, and I said, I think this is the best barbecue I've ever had. And he went, ooh, it never gets tired. I never get tired of hearing that. I was just like, yeah, thank you. And then like 4 other people came up to me to talk to me about how I was feeling about the barbecue, and I was like, I'll tell them again and again and again. This was phenomenal. Oh my, I'm so hungry just looking at it. So I ate pretty much the whole thing. I couldn't quite finish it. I felt bad, but the waitress that came and cleared stuff away was like, no, you did good. You should be proud of yourself. you almost made it. And then, I don't know, at the time I still had maybe some illusions of like trying to find a Target or something so I could buy more of the snacks I wanted, but after I ate all that, I was just like, I'm going to the airport. So I took a Lyft to the airport, which was comped by the conference, which is great. And here's the free speech booth at the airport. This airport was so chill and relaxed. Everybody was like in a good mood working there. There's hardly anyone there. I did not stand in line at all for security, which I've never had happen before. Like, I got there and there was just no one ahead of me. It was just surreal. Definitely the most chill airport I've ever been to. And I lounged around here for quite a while. I watched the Blackberry movie on my laptop. I thought it was pretty good. I really wanted to try this. Frozen custard looked very intriguing. I like how they just call it concrete. But I was just too full. I just had no appetite at all to try it. This was something I had never experienced before. To get around the airport instead of just having a constantly running shuttle. This place is so quiet that you just have to call and request the shuttle. Okay, so I had my next flight. I went to Chicago. I had a leg there. Wandering around the Chicago airport, I got really jump scared because there was anime at McDonald's from Hantaraku Mausama. They were just playing a compilation of things that McDonald's has been in for like the as featured in meal. Really spooked me, but whatever. I got some McDonald's and then I went home, and this is a record that was waiting for me in the mail. That's it. We kept it under 2 hours. There's probably a lot of other stuff that I meant to say that I forgot to say, but it's already 2 hours, and I want to go get dinner with my boyfriend and relax and enjoy my time back home. Goodbye.